anytime you do something new, by definition, you are doing something you're unqualified for. It can't be, if you've already done it, if you already have some type of qualification or skill set or experience, then you're qualified for it. It can't be new. It's just something you're repeating that you've done before. So you have to realize that there is some level of uncertainty that comes with anything that is new. So I think just accepting that is a good starting place. The second thing is that you don't need to figure it all out today. Like one of the frameworks that I like, I think I heard this originally from Sean Puri. He said ABZ. Okay. So A is an honest assessment of your current situation. Try to look at your current reality with clear eyes. Z is where you ultimately want to end up. And B is your next step. And all you need to know is A, B, and Z. You don't need to know steps C through Y. But so often people will convince themselves, well, I don't know what steps C through Y are. Or even if they realize they're not going to plan it all out, they're like, yeah, but I kind of want to know what C, D, and E are. They want to be able to see a little bit further into the future. But you have to become comfortable with some level of uncertainty. There's that quote, I just shared it in my newsletter recently. I think it's from Ian Wilson. He was a GE executive where he said, no amount of information is going to allay the fact that all of your knowledge is about the past and all of your decisions are about the future. It's just a fundamental reality of life. Knowledge is purely about the past and what has been learned, and decisions are purely about the future and what cannot be predicted. And so you have to become okay with that reality. In a lot of ways, I actually think the most powerful form of mental toughness, the most powerful or resilient form of preparation is a mindset that can handle uncertainty. We all try to resist this. We try to control reality. We try to predict scenarios and outcomes. We try to figure out what's going to happen ahead of time. But really all you need is not to predict the future. What you need is the confidence that you can handle uncertainty, that whatever happens, I will be able to figure it out. I think if I was going to encapsulate entrepreneurship in a nutshell, I would say it is the trust and the willingness that you can figure it out. There's always going to be some point on the curve with your business where you're like, well, we're not quite sure what the future is going to bring. I have a podcast and who knows how AI is going to change that. But if you trust that you can figure it out, great. You can be an entrepreneur. You'll figure it out along the way.
How do we develop that mindset practically?
I think that it's practiced in small ways and then it accumulates over time. So, I don't think sports is the only way to do this, but it's the way that I did it. So I'll use it as an example. There are many ways you could do it. One thing that's great about sports is that you have to fail publicly. I played baseball all the way through college, played it for 17 years of my life. And, the early years you're in T-ball or little league or whatever, and you're playing and then you make an error. That does not feel good, right? Like you let the whole team down, but you realize that life goes on. You failed publicly and you move forward. Later, when I was in college, we're not only playing games together, we're also training together in the gym. You show up in the gym, you look at the guy next to you, you realize he's a little bit stronger than you. That doesn't feel great. You see that. Then you're like, well, let me try to set a new PR. I'll throw 5 more pounds on the bar. You fail in front of everybody. You miss that lift.
Yeah.
That doesn't feel good, but you move on. 30 seconds later, you get back to it and you go do the next thing. And it happens again and again in small ways, but failing publicly trains your mind. It teaches you that what matters most is not that you always win, but that you always keep reaching, that you always keep striving. In a lot of ways, the real important question to ask is not what can I succeed on or what can I achieve, but what is worth reaching for? And that's really what you want, is to keep reaching, to keep striving. And as you train that muscle and develop it in all those little small ways, eventually you get to a point where you can handle it in big ways. I remember my senior year, my final season, I said, I don't want us to lose, but if we're going to lose, I want to be the one who's playing, put me out there. I can take the loss. I don't want to lose, but I can handle it. And I feel that way now too, about stuff that I do, in business. I put everything that I had into the Atomic Habits launch. We started planning that launch 15 months ahead of time. And in a lot of places in life, good enough is good enough. But every now and then you find an area where good enough is not good enough and you want to do it the best you can do it. And I decided that for me, that was one of those things that I was going to try to do as good as I could possibly do it. And that comes with risk. That comes with vulnerability. You're going to spend your next year and a half promoting and pushing and talking about this thing that you poured 3 to 5 years of your life into. What if people hate it? What if the reviews aren't any good? What if you secure big interviews and you go on morning shows and then the book flops and it doesn't sell? What if the publisher is mad at me because they paid me in advance or they were expecting it to do well and then it doesn't perform? And like, you sit with all those questions. And my thought, I think partially because I had trained that muscle over time, was I can handle it. Like if we lose, I'll deal with it, and you'll be fine. But I think once you have that confidence, then you have the confidence to go for it fully. The problem is if you don't have that confidence, you start talking yourself out of it. You water it down. You don't promote it all the way. You don't do all the things you could do because you're kind of scared of what the result could be. What if it doesn't go well? So then I don't go all the way in. And then it kind of becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy because it for sure isn't going to work that well if you don't give it everything you have.
As you're saying that, the thing that comes to mind is like the difference between playing to win and playing not to lose. And the hesitation that comes with playing not to lose versus like just going for it.
Yeah. There's in the World Cup final, Women's World Cup a couple years ago, the U.S. beat Japan, and Carly Lloyd scored like 3 goals in that game. And I think the third of her goals she kicked from midfield. It was like just super long. But the cool thing about that play is that she saw the opportunity to go for it and she went for it right away. She never talked herself out of it. It was a shot that you would never take in most circumstances. It's not a good shot. It's not a high percentage shot. But she saw an opening and she went for it. There was no hesitation. Similarly, totally different domain. One time my wife and I'm not very musical at all, but my wife is. And we were listening to Zach Brown Band play a song. And she was like, one thing I love about listening to him sing is that there's no hesitation in his voice. When it comes time to sing the lyric, he's like fully in it. He's not like second guessing himself or doubting himself. It's just like singing with confidence. And so in all these different domains, sports, music, business, you can't have that hesitation. You don't want to be the one talking yourself out of it. I think for me, I try to not be my own bottleneck. I don't want to be the first person to tell myself no. I want the world to tell me no first, and then I'll adjust based on the feedback that I get. But I don't want to talk myself out of it. One of my little sayings internally is like, I try to work backwards from magic. So what would the magical outcome be? And then let me try to figure out a couple different paths that could potentially get me there. And I'll start to take steps forward, and then I'll get feedback from the world. I don't tell myself no. Maybe the world will tell me no, and I need to adjust the course. But I start with the magical outcome and then go from there. And what you find, I see it with family. I see it with friends. Like so many people that I'm around, almost always you talk yourself out of it before the world actually prevents you from doing it. Yeah. It's very rare that you truly run up against a hard stop in the world where they say, sorry, this just isn't possible. What you're trying to do it can't happen. There's almost always somebody else you could have talked to, another approach you could have taken, another attempt you could have gone for, and you're the one who talks yourself out of doing it, not the world.